you.
All right. So welcome to the X Space. I'm Tachyon Blue. I'm working on the People of GamerGate. It's a multi-volume series of books documenting the stories of the people involved with GamerGate. I've interviewed 70 plus people involved, and most of these interviews are available on my YouTube channel, though some are book exclusives. Right now, I'm running a Kickstarter campaign to publish the books. The first volume is already done, and I'm 66% funded right now. So let's get us to 100%. Let's get us to 70 tonight, and then let's get us to 100% before the close, okay? But anyway, I've got some guests today, some other GamerGate veterans here. I've got Porcelain Chips. How you doing, Porcelain?
Doing okay on the potato.
All right, all right. And how you doing, Alex?
I'm hanging in there. I'm hanging in there.
Okay. Do either of you want to give a quick introduction about who you are or your involvement with GamerGate or what projects you're working on right now, if any?
Sure. Okay. Briefly, I am a person who caught on to this and got swept up in this and still feel very passionately about this. And that is the extent of it.
I am known as the Hatman or the Hat 2 pretty much everywhere on the internet. I was responsible for running the subreddit KotakuInAction, which was the main Gamergate hub on Reddit and one of two main Gamergate hubs on the internet, the other being Gamergate HQ on 8chan. I ran KotakuInAction for the first year of Gamergate and the first year of its existence, really. After that, I stepped down and basically decided to do other things. And now I'm in law school. So, yay.
Woo!
Based. Well, Porcelain, we don't have any questions just yet. I do want to ask, why are you so passionate about GamerGate all these years later?
It's because it keeps coming up. It won't die. If it would die, I could lay my sword down and rest. But that's not happening, so I can't.
Understandable. How about you, Hatman? What keeps your interest 10 years later?
I mean, if anything, it's the fact that people keep dredging it up and they don't know the proper story of it, or at least they willfully misrepresent the story of it. I mean, how many times have we seen somebody say Gamergate was actually about this? Like I've got a whole note that I keep with like the year's worst Gamergate takes. Um, let me read you some of the greatest hits.
Let's do it.
Actually, let's see. So, 2019, Gamergate was the seed that started World War III. Somebody actually, and these are all things that people have actually said, by the way. Like these are not like some of them are amalgamations of what multiple people have said, but these are all like actual things that people are saying and have said about Gamergate. 2020, Gamergate caused a worldwide pandemic, threw the United States into chaos, and enabled the rise of fascism worldwide. 2021, Gamergate was the biggest event since 9/11 to shift the cultural paradigm. It's directly responsible for the attempted coup of the US government on January 6th, the spread of QAnon, the rise of fascism worldwide, the legitimization of turf ideology through anti trans legislation, vaccine skepticism, promotion of incels, and the rejection of historical truths through opposition to CRT.
Wait, is that Asia Romano? Who did that one?
I didn't write down names, but yeah, that I wouldn't be surprised if Asia Romano said something like that. Let's see. 2022, Gamergate should be renamed because it wasn't just about gaming. It's actually the root of everything wrong with the internet and society today. Hell, it's even related to a racist live streaming himself murdering black people, and it's the reason why Amber Heard lost a lawsuit against Johnny Depp. Someone actually said Gamergate was the reason why Amber Heard lost a lawsuit to Johnny Depp.
What was their argument for the World War III thing? That seems pretty wild.
It was basically the election of Trump, and they thought Trump was going to start World War III. So a lot of it relates to like Trumpism and the allegations of fascism associated with it. The January 6th thing, of course. Um, Like here, 2018, Gamergate was a test run for Russian bots that tried to influence the socio-political attitudes of men, which resulted in the rise of far-right ideologies, leading to the election of Donald Trump and a resurgence in white nationalism.
So how I know that there's obviously a lot of articles out there saying stuff like this. We talked about Vox is kind of a prime suspect here, but there's others too. CNET did an article. The New York
hmm
Times did the Everything Is Gamergate series, which Chris Ferguson and I recently debunked.
hmm
Um,
Washington Post
but
did one.
Mhm.
Yeah, Vox, BuzzFeed, I remember ran a couple of them. They ran a takedown of the KotakuInAction moderators back during the height of Gamergate too, trying to tie us to all kinds of crazy shit we were doing.
So, but how common do you think this view is? Like, is it just clickbait from rags, from basically people wanting to get views off of using the Gamergate name, or
Um,
is this like a widely held belief that like
no,
Gamergate elected Trump?
I think it's a little bit of both. As far as Gamergate electing Trump, no, that's pretty widely held as factual amongst most people that have covered it. At least that I've seen, even some like pro Gamergate people, they were like,
Yeah, Milo
yeah,
thinks that.
yeah, this is like, yeah, the well, you can't deny the connection between Gamergate and Steve Bannon, who was running Breitbart at the time, which was the first outlet to start running pro Gamergate pieces. And then Steve Bannon takes what he learned from that and moves on to the MAGA movement, and you get Trump elected in 2016. Like, I don't think Gamergate was a direct or has direct links to Trump getting elected. I think they're indirect, but you can still see kind of where people are coming from when they say, yeah, Trump is a result of Gamergate.
What? So, in the sense that Steve Bannon took what he learned from Gamergate and applied it on the campaign trail.
Yes. In the same way you could say like the internet learned from Gamergate. Like journalists learn how to I guess cover their asses a little bit better during or not during, but after Gamergate, especially when you had a lot of people trying to say that journalists were the enemy of the people and whatnot. Um, it shit, I was gonna say something else, but I totally forgot.
I think you're on point there, though, with the line of logic going on. That I think one thing that is accurate about any kind of blame is that GamerGate represents some aspect of the cultural zeitgeist that has been bubbling up and you know heading in the direction of a lot of different things. But the problem is that like people have this really bizarre obsession with, instead of pointing at one phenomenon and saying like, that might be a canary in the coal mine, instead saying, what if we blamed everything on the canary? Everything.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean, you're not far off from that. Gamergate still gets a lot of blame for how the culture of the internet and I guess the culture war in general operates nowadays, which is really funny because you see a lot of journalists and academics say like, well, we didn't learn anything from Gamergate. Like there was nothing gained from it. We're still facing the same issues that were brought up. And like, well, you didn't really listen. you 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 did not do the things that Gamergate wanted you to do, and they were very simple. And instead, you lied about them for years and said, "Well, we didn't take it seriously," and yet it's still a big boogeyman.
Or maybe it's accurate in that they didn't learn anything. Maybe it's a grammatical thing. They didn't learn anything.
You really think that they would admit fault like that, though?
I've seen some weird admissions through strange amounts of projection and other stuff sometimes.
Well, it's also this is how could you how could they simultaneously hold the view, and it could be different people who hold these views, but like how could you simultaneously hold the view that like Gamergate's responsible for almost everything that's happened in the past like 10 years, but at the same time like also say we've learned nothing from it? Like what have you been doing?
I don't know. I mean, it seems really contradictory to me.
It's kinda like, I think it's a form of narrative control. It's wanting to hold the control of the narrative and then quickly let it go and ditch all responsibility or culpability or anything about it whenever it's convenient. So I think that's how you get the Schrodinger's cat issue.
Mm.
What do you think of people changing their mind on Gamergate this year? There's been a lot of cases of this. There's been um, Peter Coffin changed his mind on Gamergate. He didn't switch sides. He identifies as neutral now. But then also so did Graham Lynham. He changed his mind on Gamergate. He made a whole video about how he where he admits that he basically spread misinformation about Gamergate
Yeah, that was
that he knew was untrue.
that's actually really funny because I remember correctly. Let me go check my copy of Crash Override to make sure. Um, yeah, he is actually quoted on the back of Crash Override. And for those who don't know, that is Zoe Quinn's memoir about Gamergate and all the bullying that she allegedly received from it. Why I have a copy? Your guess is as good as mine.
Well, I thought about picking it up so I could try to. I don't think there's any value in it though, because
No,
I've seen bits and pieces, and basically she doesn't name like names or anything like that at all. She's basically just it's all just like take my word for it from what
she
I've read from clips, like little pieces here and there.
the closest that she gets is like calling people like Mundane Matt like certain names like Angry Skull Face. Like that's
Yeah, I
yeah,
saw that.
Okay,
that's how she refers to him.
that has always been super fascinating to me about that memoir and about other people and how they, attribute things and quote things, is that this movement has been 99.9% like anonymous, people using screen names, people intentionally not wanting their real identities out there, so would prefer you to use all their screen names and all their gamer tags and whatever. And so what's so bizarre about that is like, why take somebody's screen name and then create a abstract ism out of that name by saying little blue skull man,
Because
unless you're
she'd still be liable for libel.
yeah, it's just so funny to me because it's like this is the perfect movement if you wanted to deconstruct it. It's like I mean, I'm gonna be honest. I personally would be very hesitant about like really jumping out and mask off saying like you're lying about me. It's a strangely perfect opportunity to attribute things wrongly to people because that happens all the time in media. All the time, people attribute things to celebrities and stuff that they didn't do pretty blatantly, and it's like you could I mean, I get the liable angle, but, like, this is, like, such an opportunity, and yet everyone's like, "Oh, I can't possibly hint at anything." It's like, "Hmm, that sounds like you might be really lying a lot."
Well, I don't think she wants another lawsuit on her hands, frankly, because the Aaron's lawsuit she barely got out of, just barely. So having to actually pay out because I know if she actually named names in there, people would sue her. They absolutely would. Um, and she wouldn't be able to weasel her way out of it. Basically, I don't think that she would have a sympathetic judge in her corner like she did with Aaron's suit.
Well, and also, I think different people, come up with different levels of outrageous claims, but I would say that she very often came up with extremely outlandish claims.
Oh yeah.
Uh, and so that's really hard to walk back.
What are some of the claims that she made in her book that perhaps the public may not know about? Because I've actually not read it. So
She there was a lot of her backstory about how she grew up in like a horrible family and she was abused and had to move in with boyfriends over the years and she had like gone from New England to Canada at some point. Um Is this the bookmark copy? I have actually 2 copies of it. I got a pristine copy and a copy that I wrote in. No, this is the pristine copy.
Oh, I
Um,
see. Sorry, go ahead. I was gonna. We have a someone tweeted at us. Buzzword du jour just tweeted. It's tweeted. It's late here. I feel bad for bailing. Good idea to record this conversation, Tachyon. Too sleepy to think of any questions. Yeah, no worries. Feel free to stick around and hang out. Also, feel free to retweet the stream. I don't know if you two have already. It's a new link now because it's a new space.
let's see.
It was
Oh, we got.
so hard to get this thing to work. I don't know what it is. I don't want to derail too much, but I feel like for some reason right now, older Yeti mics are having a harder time interfacing with certain streaming programs. I don't know why. I literally have no idea why, but I'm just noticing I'm starting to have this problem of this plug and play device is suddenly not vibing with everybody.
Oh,
So
here's
you're on.
one. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, God. You were saying about the book, Alex.
Yeah. Um, her mom was apparently the one who had abused her, trying to turn her against her dad when they divorced. Um, her life as a teenager with the anarchist cookbook. Let's see. Infatuation with rotten.com, if y'all remember that website.
I remember something awful.
Yeah,
Does
something
she write about
awful.
that in there?
Rotten was like lots of gore and shit.
Ah,
Mhm,
Ogrish was like a competitor to Rotten at the time.
mhm.
Let's see.
I was there.
I remember Ogrish. I don't remember Rotten as much, but I remember Ogrish in part because my student driving instructor told us to go there if we wanted to see what car crashes look like. I will
I re-
never forget that.
well, sometimes it's a good thing to get scared straight, you know?
Oh yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah, no, I remember Rotten as sort of this website that really, I don't know what to call it. It really oriented my head in terms of violence and bad things were no longer like very abstract ideas in my head, but like, oh, okay, war is bad. That's what that's what it taught me. It's like, oh, war is bad, violence is bad, hurting, all these things are bad things, and they're not really things to joke about or to take super lightly. But everyone interpreted those sites differently. But that's
Yeah.
that's what I got out of it.
yeah. When I was in the heady days of my youth, I was spending a lot of time on like the watch people. Not a lot of time, but some time on like the watch people die subreddit. Back when that was still a thing.
Yeah,
There's some
Edgy
wild.
boy.
they
There
banned
were
that
some
one
wild
fairly
videos there, but
recently,
it's
didn't
it's
they?
it kind of like you said. It kind of there's some value in seeing these horrific incidents, just so you sort of understand violence, like what things that can happen, just crazy wild moments out of nowhere, and suddenly people are just getting hit by cars or electrocuted or some horrible death, and it sort of teaches you a little bit to be on your toes.
Yeah, I just got it from
So
4chan. Like back when, God, this had to have been like 2006 or 2007 or something. Back when B kept gore on the front page to kind of deter new people or make sure that only the toughest, quote unquote, of them got through. And that was my introduction to it.
it sounds like we all have an appropriate amount of street cred uh, when addressing these claims in the book. Hmm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we
No,
gotcha.
it's really funny how like you know the story from your perspective and you know what's true about it. And then to have someone else come in and basically tell lies about your own experience, you feel like you're being gaslit.
Mhm.
And gaslit through a book, no less.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird also because as far as I understand from everything that she was saying at the time from her perspective is that she was really shielding herself from most like 90% of the conversation. And so then it's really strange for that same person who like kind of walled themselves off to also then end up being such a to then end up publishing a book and sort of giving their opinion about how they think you experienced something or
Which is funny because we know that she didn't wall herself off from it. Like, we know that that is a
yeah.
blatant
Yeah,
lie.
not at all.
Like, she
We
was
know that.
yeah.
We know that, but she kept saying like I have to protect
Oh, yeah.
myself. And so it's like so I'll take those claims on face value. Like okay, so you were walling yourself off and not looking at most of everything, right? Mhm.
Meanwhile, she's running, IRC channels that are dedicated to, regurgitating what other gamergaters are saying about her and what they're posting and how they're going to counter this narrative that's come out and how they're going to discredit this person. It's high school cliquish. Like, it's so stupid.
Yeah, I don't think any honest reading of like the Crash Override Network Skype logs, like would tell you that like, oh no, we're completely out of the loop and try to avoid all this.
No, of course not. Well, even outside of the con leaks, like, you can look back to her Twitter. She was on top of everything all the time. Like, every new claim that would come out or every, like, new allegation of harassment, she was like, "Yes, well, I've been through this too, but I am actually the central figure of this. Like, don't get it twisted. Like, Anita Sarkeesian and Brianna Wu, they are not the central figures of Gamergate. It's me, actually. Give me attention."
Yeah, well, she didn't really care for Brianna.
Oh,
We
no,
know that from
no. There are some things that I could tell you that she has said about Zoe Quinn, but I am not allowed to say those things, so
oh darn, that's disappointing.
no, unfortunately. Some things said in confidence have to be kept in confidence.
No, that's understandable. I
But,
hold the same policy.
I will say that they are unflattering. I will leave it at that.
Does she ever talk at all about like the pro Gamergate perspective or like ethics or anything like that?
No, except to say that it's all just a smokescreen. I
Oh,
mean, it's
of course.
all like, well, I was the one targeted, and they used ethics as a smokescreen to continue targeting me, and I'm the victim of all of this. You know, they heard the allegations of my ex and those lies, and they assumed them to be true and started attacking me as a result. I mean, that's basically what it boils down to.
I'm not sure why we're not getting people jumping in. The last two I did, we had tons of people watching and listening and requesting to speak. So
They don't like me.
that must be it. Yeah.
They
Have you both
definitely
retweeted
don't
it?
like me. No, let me jump on it.
All right. I can make a new tweet
Uh,
too. Well, I could probably share it on other social media. Well, if I share it on Discord, it's only get people who already know about the project, so
yeah,
not too much value in that. Here, I'll retweet whatever you two tweet out.
yeah. Hold
Do you think we're going to see the narrative be corrected?
It would take a lot. It would take a lot, and I mean this sincerely, not just from a like, well, you're gonna have to overhaul journalism. No, you're gonna have to do academia too, because there are so many academic works about how Gamergate was terrible and how it's resulted in all this horrible stuff online and in the real world. Like, you're really going to have to, like, overhaul the narrative from all ends. I mean, yeah, journalism, the Wikipedia article, which is infamous for being horrible.
I'm taking that on, by the way. The Wikipedia article.
Mhm.
One of the volumes is going to have a takedown of that.
Well, not to say that's. I don't ever see that. I don't ever see that changing, honestly.
Well, the Wikipedia is never going to change, probably, because the
Yeah,
people
well, no,
in charge
because yeah,
there don't want it to.
yeah, no. Wikipedia is a dumpster fire. Um, no, I don't think the Wikipedia article is going to change. I mean, academia, I have no idea how you're going to change the narratives around that. Like Catherine Cross got her nails into the academic sphere and the narrative about Gamergate there long ago, and that set the tone. That just set the tone. And of course, all the journalists aren't going to come around on it because they feel like they were victimized too. So no, I think if the narrative was to ever be corrected, it would have to be like generations down the line. I don't think it would happen during our lifetimes. And
What do you
even then it might be forgotten about by then.
What do you think of people doing like my books, or like a airplay documentary, or Grim Jim wrote a book too? Like, what do you think about people doing stuff like this to try and
I mean,
correct it?
it's a valiant effort, and like some people are going to see it and be like, okay, I understand now. But ultimately, I think it's going to end up like, the Red Pill documentary, for example.
Yeah, Cassie J. Yeah,
Yes. I think it's gonna end up like that, where the people who need to hear it and see it and read it are either not going to engage with it, or they're going to engage with it with a closed mind and keep that mind under lock and key the entire time.
okay. Now, I do have another approach I'm taking with this too. Like Chris Ferguson and I recently, this is a later development, but I thought it would be a good idea to try and be very specific in our critiques of the media's coverage of Gamergate.
Mhm,
So, like Chris and I have talked about like the New York Times article in detail, the Washington Post article in detail. We're planning on doing several more, like including like we're doing UN Dispatch, their article about
mhm.
the UN.
Oh god.
Yeah, we're doing their coverage next. What do you think of us like targeting these specific outlets and putting pressure on them, and like maybe we get some retractions or corrections at a few places here and there?
Honestly, I think it's just a little bit too late for it all. Like you can get a retraction or a correction on an article, but unless it's like within a day or two of publication, most people aren't going to see it and most people aren't going to really care about it.
That's probably
Like
true.
sure, the ones that have skin in the game, like the pro Gamergate people, they're going to be like, yeah, look, see, we made them take it down because it was a false claim. But I don't think it's really going to resonate with the general public in the same way.
Yeah, well, it might if you think if like they revisit, like let's say like the New York Times revisits Gamergate after all this time, and like they end up
Hmm.
coming up with a really neutral or even like pro Gamergate leaning article.
Hmm.
Is that going to make a difference?
That would be a lot better, honestly. Like if they revisit it and they have more of an open mind and they actually would like engage with pro Gamergate people and like the people who were actually there at the time, as opposed to just people who jumped in on it later on to either grift or make a name for themselves. But I repeat myself. Um, like if they do that, then sure, maybe that would change some perspectives. But I just don't see them doing it. Like it's a lot of crow for them to eat, and they don't have a very big appetite.
That's true. So, what would you do if you were going to try and change it? I'll ask you both this.
I don't know that I could. Is the problem. Like it seems almost like a fool's errand. Like I've tried to talk about it in my limited capacity. I've talked about it for your book. I've talked about it to a couple of academics, to journalists. I tried to talk about it on Timcast, but that didn't work out very well. Um, and I've said that if they want me back on to talk about Gamergate, to actually talk about Gamergate, I will do it because it's it was a big part of my life. I, I almost failed out of college for that shit. But I don't know that I would be able to really do anything to affect the narrative. It's just keep telling the truth like I've always done. That's all I can do, and that's what I'm good at. So
Okay. What about you, Chips?
Um, I think the best we can do right now is to keep not like, I don't know what to call it. But to generate evidence, a body of evidence of what went down, and make sure that it's available for the future. This is a mild tangent, but like I have been doing a bunch of research lately, and a lot of it has had to do with I've been reading a lot of small publications from like the 18th century, and that was a very interesting time period in the Americas because there were a lot of printing press brought over, but not a lot of books to copy. And so people were constantly getting their stuff published during this little window of time that normally nobody would publish their junk. It's just everyone was bored and wanted something to read. And it kind of inspires me that, you can put together something and it will be seen. And it might even be seen a long time from now. And it might be very useful. And it's a useful record because it's firsthand. A big thing you find with historical research is that you end up with these second, third, fourth hand sources that can be very useless. And you really need those firsthand accounts somewhere to keep going back to, because if they're not there, it's just speculation. And sorry, and I just think that ultimately, like with your book series, I do think that you are doing a good job and that you're laying that groundwork. You're making that thing just available there. And Hat, I think that you did a great job with going on the Timcast, even though it didn't work out. I think it was a valiant effort. you know.
I wish it worked out. I
Yeah.
really wish it did.
Yeah, I wish it did too. You,
Well,
you what do you should have just been more vocal. I feel like you should have just spoke up and like even if Tim I feel like he was a terrible host. I mean like
Mm,
he should have if he's gonna invite you there, he should cut to you every, few minutes and be like, what do you think, Kat? Or,
right.
what's your perspective
And
or
to her credit a bit, Brianna did say like she was trying to throw some things towards me to respond to, but either I just didn't pick up on it or I felt like she was still in the middle of making a point, so I just didn't say anything. And the conversation just kept going between her and Tim, and I just I felt like there was no there was no edge for me in there. That and I had really tried to um, study some certain topics about Gamergate that I wanted to bring up. Um, so I spent a lot of time prepping for that specifically, and not for like, well, Tim Pool is doing a poor job of running a YouTube show because he's a right winger and spreads misinformation and stuff like that. I was like, well, I don't really have anything to say about that. So I have things to say about Gamergate, but I can't tie that into Gamergate in any way.
hey, misinformation, that's your opening.
Oh Lord. But but yeah, no, Chips, I get what you're saying about trying to compile evidence because a lot of the links that were on not just Deep Freeze, but like the old Gamergate wiki when it was still available. Um and what we have in the archives of that now, a lot of those are gone. And I don't know if there's any way to replace them. Like I know there's a big archive of stuff somewhere. I think the GG Historia project has
Yeah, they've got a
that.
lot. Lunar does
Yeah.
too.
Lunar's got a ton of stuff. Like I'm surprised at how much stuff he has. Um, but even in like my own research about like the origins and like the early days of Gamergate and stuff, I could barely find some things. It's just the internet deletes so much stuff after a certain amount of time that we think the internet is forever, but it's really not. Like a lot of it is lost media now.
Yeah, no, it's definitely true. I've run into
Well,
this.
I was just gonna say that is the interesting thing is that the internet is both like forever and it's not because like traces,
Mhm,
fumes get left behind, like little smatterings, a completely broken, chunk of HTML that has like one or two legible things in it where you're like, that was a news article that I would have
mhm,
liked to read.
mhm.
And it's just amazing how quickly it can happen. I almost feel like things used to be easier to dredge up again, and I feel like nowadays things are somehow disappearing faster.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know if they're disappearing fast or not. But I do know that you it's there's so many broken links, and even a lot of stuff we did archive, which is great that we have so many archives floating around. But if you don't have a link to the original source that you can put into the archive machines, or if you don't have a link to the archive, then it's just floating around out there aimlessly, and it's not of any use to anybody.
Oh yeah, no, that was a big problem I ran into when I was researching the border house. The whole website's been taken down. So to just get the links to the articles that I needed to make all my points, I basically had to first go through the Wayback Machine to uh, individual dates of the front page of the blog and parse through those just to see if the articles I was looking for would come up. And if they did, that was great. And thankfully, I was able to get a lot of them, but there were still some that I could not find and had to leave out of my research because I just there was no way to link back to it. And I don't know if Wayback didn't archive it or if Archive Today never archived it, but either way, it's just lost. I mean, the most I could find was like references on other pages like Kotaku or Eurogamer or stuff.
How's all the stuff from like GeoCities and Homestead.com? Is all that stuff gone at this
Oh
point?
Lord. Um, I mean, the most I could think is like if some of it was on Wayback, because even like some of the old websites that I used to have when when I was a kid through like Angel Fire and stuff. Like
Oh,
I just
Angel
tried pulling that up the other day on Wayback Machine and they didn't have an archive of it. And I'm like, well, it's lost forever now. It's
Fire.
gone.
That was another piece of nostalgia you just brought up. I remember
Angel Fire.
that. Yeah. Ugh. Ugh.
The
Okay.
good old days.
I'll try
The
not to get
Wild
too.
West internet.
Yeah, I'll try not to get too off track. That just like my brain just went like we need to talk about Angel Fire now, and it's like no, no, it's not the subject of this conversation.
Remember web rings?
Wow, that's some ancient history right there.
Remember when universities used to host art gallery websites for people to upload their content to because there weren't any art hosting websites yet? Ah,
Oh my god.
you can just
Deep
feel
cuts, deep cuts.
you can just feel the gray hairs coming in. Just actually, a funny thing about archiving, and I'll try not to get too off topic, but about archiving in general is like I wonder, is it different on Telnet in terms of this kind of stuff? Like, I know Telnet is much more about physical compute individual computers hooking up and stuff. And I wonder if it's either easier to find complete things or if it's more difficult to find complete things.
Can you still access like archives of Telnet stuff?
yeah, like I'm just thinking I mean I think it's still there under everything. And I mean I was on Telnet like in the 2000s and in maybe the early 2010. I don't know I forgot the last time. I was like mucking around in muds, which is really amazing that those were still going. Uh, or
Yep, absolutely. My other book. I
yeah.
still need. I need to do more work on that. I've only done like half of the first interview so far, but I'm so busy right now.
Oh, well, it's, it's always good, I think, to have like a little side bit going on while you're working on your main thing, just so you can decompress sometimes. And
It's probably true.
they're still kind of connected. I mean, it's still about video games.
True.
Yeah.
I'm still not sure why nobody's showing up. This is really weird. I've not seen this before.
Again,
But
they
this is
don't
my
like
third
me.
one, so it's true. They don't like me either.
They do not like me.
No,
I wonder
but
because I put Kickstarter 66% in there, so people are like, "Oh, he's just trying to sell us stuff."
Maybe.
I can
it
change that. I think.
isn't that sad how how many bad Kickstarters there have been at this point? So now like a totally legitimate project, it's very difficult to make a point of that. Like, no, really, it's a thing.
Yeah, next time I do one of these, I'm
Um,
doing a few more. I'll definitely have to not put Kickstarter in the title.
yeah.
See how that plays.
Oh,
But that's okay.
it
I'll upload a copy of this, and there will also be a copy on X too of the recording, so people can watch it later.
yeah, and if you wanna chop stuff up, go for it. Uh,
I probably won't, just because I don't have the time really.
yeah. I mean, the kids these days, they love shorts and
True.
TikToks, and TikTok is ruining book publishing at the moment. So if
Oh yeah, I've
TikTok is
heard
that
about that.
powerful, oh, you've heard. Hmm. Okay. I'm gonna try not to side tangent too much, but yes, you've heard, haven't you? Yeah. Oh.
How are they ruining it?
So what's happening, and science, if you guys want to step in, yeah, please do. But basically, what's going on is that TikTok is fueling or sort of driving book purchasing right now on a mass scale. And so publishers are now starting to specifically publish books that sell well through TikTok advertisements, not because of the actual content of the book. And it's getting really screwy really fast.
Yeah, like there are straight up advertisements for like recommended by Book Talk in retail stores now.
Yeah, I've actually
Yes.
seen that like Barnes and Noble. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the best part is that a lot of it is like I don't mean to diss people too much, but it's largely like Zoomers rediscovering the Harlequin romance without realizing that the Harlequin romance already existed. They're like, there's this book. It's a high fantasy book, and there's spiciness in it. And it's like, yes, that used to be available at the supermarket at the checkout line. That used to always be there. It's always been here. And they're like, no. It's new and shiny. And we should push the whole publishing industry in this direction.
It's a resurgence of the supernatural romance genre, except more fantasy elements to it this time.
And on steroids.
Is that bad?
Horrible. Yeah, it's bad.
The quality is concerning at this point.
Not only that, but like you see how these people talk about how folks on Twitter don't have any media literacy. Oh no, check out Book Talk. Check out Book Talk. They have no media literacy whatsoever.
And something that I find really enjoyable actually is to watch people who read more traditional forms of fantasy try to review these romantasy books from Book Talk. And what's starting to happen is there's almost like an algorithm showing up in these stories, like these repeating tropes that are becoming embedded into them that don't exist anywhere else, but they're just looping at this point. So my question is like, when is the machine going to break down? Like, when have we recombined and recycled some of these unique tropes into each other so hard that the whole thing falls over.
Yeah, I actually don't. I need to read way more. I want to get. So one thing I've noticed is that this past year of my life has been interesting in a lot of ways. God, I'm very self-centered, so bear with me a sec. But it's been very interesting in many ways, like because I've been so focused on this project that I haven't really had the time to really pursue hobbies or interests as much. So like one thing I want to do in 2025 is have like a more of a work-life balance, and
Mhm.
also try to pick up some hobbies, either like new hobbies or like literature, like science fiction and fantasy, especially. Like just read a couple books, just have something that I can lightly do and relax and unwind after all the craziness.
How are you about audiobooks?
I like them. I listen to them a lot, but not a lot. I mean, not a lot, but I used to listen to them a lot. They're fine. Why?
Because I know for some people, like they just either can't get into them for whatever reason, or they have a preference for like either ebooks or physical copies. I say this because audiobooks have been great for me because I don't have a whole lot of time to sit and read anymore. But I can listen to a book if I'm like driving to campus and back or just going wherever the hell. Because I travel quite a bit now when I'm not in class. Um, so having that pretty much downtime for me to use for an audiobook has been great. Like I'm actually able to read, quote unquote, again.
Well, that's awesome. I'm glad it's working out for you. How do you feel like you retain as much information when you do the audiobook?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It it helps in my case because I do have physical copies of a lot of the books that I have on audiobook as well. So if I need to, like, I can go back and look at something. But I guess it's because like I retain information audibly pretty well. So I feel like I've been fulfilled, I guess I can say, by listening to a book. Like it feels like I've read it.
Okay. I think the way I've been doing like the audiobooks, like I used to like listen to them while driving, right? Or while playing games, like multiplayer games online, like and I'm like I feel like that's not the best environment to do an audiobook.
No, mm-mm,
Maybe
I would
driving's
not.
fine, but
Driving is fine because you don't really have a lot to think about except for the road, and it's kind of like second nature to you. But like doing something a little more integrated, I guess I could say, like playing video games. No, because you're paying attention more to the game than anything else. So it's kind of hard to have more than just background noise.
yeah. Hey, Simon, and we have a request actually. We have our first caller. Science Fiction Book Club. We've talked before. Hey, welcome, welcome. You're a speaker.
It'll show up as listener for me. I don't know if it's gone through yet.
Science, can you hear us? Can you speak?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good evening. It's nice to hear. It's nice to see you guys. I don't know if I was hearing a recording from earlier on, but you were briefly having a conversation about Harlequin romance and romantasy. Is that what you're still talking about?
We
I
can
think
if you
we
want
moved
to.
on a little bit from there, but chips, if you feel like backing it up a little bit.
Well,
I mean, well, it's kind of it's sort of a difficult thing to escape in the zeitgeist right now. If you're doing any kind of a writing project, excuse me, because it's driving so much of the sales and the focus of publishing.
yes, I would certainly agree with that. I mean, I have some perspective here in London. You might find this interesting. I've known because obviously I organised the science fiction book club, and after I started that, because we're exclusively reading science fiction, I started the fantasybookclub.org as well, and a couple of friends of mine run that in my stead now. But at the beginning of 2020, my dad was diagnosed with cancer, and that was just before the pandemic. And because some of his meds, he were immunosuppressive, there was a 2.5, almost 3 year period where I didn't go into a single bookshop. And when I went back into a bookshop at the end of 2022, December 2022, I was absolutely astonished. I was floored by the absolute flood of romantasy. And the thing that disturbed me about it was that it looks that what's happened is that the science fiction has been reduced with in its own section down to a real rump. And lots of the bookshops in London are now completely flooded with romantasy, and they all seem to have some variation of the Trajan Pro font on the front cover, and it's sort of inescapable. And I can't imagine this bubble will last that long. And it's actually made some, but I think it's made some pathologies within the publishing industry more visible to more people, because it's been in the last 4 or 5 months that I've seen more like really viral tweets and comments, because it's feeding this idea that men don't read and that men don't want to read, and it's putting a lot of attention on the fact that the publishing industry is largely staffed by women, and they've sort of believed their own hype that their books were all that people wanted to read. And I think they're discovering in short order that actually there's a lot of guys who do want to read. A lot of them are quite happy to read fantasy, but a huge amount of them read science fiction as well. And for my money, it's made these I think it's really healthy that these pathologies actually get more exposure.
Yeah, I agree. Like there's some kind of sort of a culture war almost happening because of this over in the book sphere, that it's not like as like, I don't know what to call it, sensational or outlandish feeling as like what's going on in movies or video games, but it's sort of bubbling up.
Yeah,
And
I think you're right. It's definitely becoming more visible. I mean, part of me does wonder, was this going on, but it was undercover prior to Elon Musk's buying of Twitter? Was there some suppression of particular particular hashtags that people may have tried to raise the visibility on these things? I mean, going back to the conversation we were having the other night about Gamergate and how the sort of puppies and how people who were sort of right of center, let's say, were being excised and pushed out of the publishing world, certainly in America and to some extent Britain as well. I think all these things are sort of quite inextricably linked.
yeah, that's the
I would
funny
say so.
thing. Oh, I'm sorry if I over.
It's okay. Go. You go ahead. It's okay.
All I was gonna say is I agree. There's something overarching going on, but kind of going back also to what we were saying about Gamergate earlier. Is there's this weird thing of like, it's like there's a bunch of I feel like a bunch of canaries in the coal mine screaming out at the same time. They're in different cages, but they're all kind of going off.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Certainly, the visibility on these things. I suppose maybe what will happen now is that people will start arguing about what's causing it and what these things mean. I always think of that meme of two people standing on either side of the letter 6 painted on the floor, and one is shouting that it's 6, and the other person is saying that it's 9. I'm sure. Unfortunately, what we saw in Gamergate was when people complain about being excluded or being attacked unjustly, that's fuel for the other side to say, look, these terrible people are just abusive. I'm not entirely sure that the public will buy that so readily now. I think there are 10 years ago when that happened during Gamergate and the publishing industry, I think people weren't used to that playbook. But I think with the mixture of different voices now that are able to be heard, I hope, got my fingers crossed, but I hope that won't have the same weight as it had 10 years ago.
How much do y'all know about the back end of publishing? I'm curious because I have a little bit of experience.
Only
in this field.
self-publishing.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm dodging or evading or not on purpose. I'll be honest. It's partially stuff like the whole book talk phenomenon that is making me pull back.
Oh, really?
So
Sorry.
it's interesting because before book talk, well, first a little bit of background. So one of my degrees is in creative writing, and by that I know several people, at least who I've graduated with, who have attempted to and who have successfully published things, everything from like poetry to actual novels. Um, all of those people, might I add, were either women or people of color. In part because the publishing industry, or at least the big publishing houses, are a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Uneasy, I guess I could say, about publishing books by men unless they are like established authors.
I think
A
I know
lot
what
of
you
it
mean.
a lot of it is the result of a hashtag that went around several years ago called "We Need Diverse Books." And this was basically an attempt to undo, I guess I could say, the Western canon, by saying, "Hey, we need to focus more on women authors. We need to focus more on authors of color, queer authors, for example, and their experiences are going to drive their books, and these books are going to, in turn, uh, create a or not create, but change the social understanding of literature as we know it. It's not just a white man's game anymore." And this is some stuff that I had gotten in college too. That was basically said to us like the Western canon is going the way of the dodo eventually, and it was kind of weird to hear that. But when you tie that in with what publishing houses have been doing, it makes a lot of sense. And now it seems like with book talk, most of the viral books that are coming out are all from women authors, which reinforces this idea that one, men aren't reading because they're not reading things that have, or not, sorry, they're not reading books that focus on uh, a female audience specifically, but also they're not writing either. And if men aren't writing books for male audiences, and it stands to reason that, yeah, men won't read. And a lot of that, I think a lot of that suffering is hitting the science fiction and fantasy, to bring it back around to the main topic, because that's what men like. I mean, they like high fantasy, they like science fiction, but you don't get that with the fantasy romance and the supernatural romance and stuff like that.
Well,
That's
you sort
really
of do.
popular in book talk.
Well, you sort of do, but it's a toned down version. It's very, very like the classic description that I've heard is of the style of book that maybe you're talking about is books where people sit around all day talking about their gender, drinking tea, but on a spaceship. And the but on a spaceship is about the full extent of the, like, those words. If you put those
Mhm.
words into a book, it doesn't really make it a science fiction book. Everything happened in this story, but on a spaceship doesn't really make it a science fiction book. I think the author you're thinking
They don't
about
want to
is
talk about.
Kay Tempest Bradford, is the woman who wrote the initial tweet, I think in 2011 or 2012. And it's funny, I was writing, I was writing this afternoon about this. There was a change of language, because if you look prior to 2012, 2013, agents and publishers were saying, well, yeah, we want science fiction and fantasy, and we love this author and that author. And then they'd finish it off by saying, and we're especially interested, or I'm particularly interested in, you know, black, gay, lesbian, blah blah blah, and they would list out
Mhm.
a whole load of identity markers. And then something in 2012, 2013, the especially interested turned into only interested.
Mm-hmm.
And the word only came in. And I think it was the addition or the replacement of other words that the word only came in, because that suddenly, because everyone knew that it was code for, prior to that, this is what they really were interested in. Everything else was sort of filler. People often make a joke here in London. If you see a restaurant or a takeaway from a particular country, if it's got two countries listed, like Chinese and Vietnamese, you always know that they put the word Chinese at the front because it's what they know sells, and the ethnicity of the particular people that are in the restaurant is the second country that's mentioned in the list, and that's what they would prefer to cook for you. And it's the same way with agents. I think I know it's a very overused term, but the mask sort of slipped when they put the word only in. Yeah. Sorry, I've been thinking about this all day long, talking with friends. So
no, it's okay.
Splurging a bit.
I think it's an important thing to address because it's all sort of part of this weird cultural storm we're in, where all these different things are happening, and you can't contribute or scapegoat everything to one thing, but it's all also happening around the same time. And it's definitely something to consider. The thing I've been thinking about is that, when it comes to author pseudonyms, why haven't we all become a boy named Sue? You know?
Oh right, yeah.
No, I mean, I can start handing them out right here. Tachyon, your name is now Jessica. Hatman, I think Alexandra is a natural choice, perhaps.
Yes. It is a natural choice.
Send in those manuscripts.
It's funny how when I first started college, they told me if you want to get a book published, make sure that it's a series, because publishers want series so they can sell the movie and TV rights. And coming out of college, it was like you'd be lucky to get a book published because you're a white guy.
That's unfortunate. I mean, it's terrible, really. I mean, if that's true, I mean,
I've heard that comment so much from people, and it's actually only in the last year, I would say, that people are making that comment public. Prior to, I would say, a year and a half ago, those comments were made sort of semi-private. So as reprehensible as that exclusion is, at least people are talking about it openly now.
Yeah.
What a weird world it would be, though, if we, taking your point, Porcelain, if we live in a world where, in order to get published, a lot of men authors start publishing under pen names as women. That would be interesting. Go ahead.
I was just gonna. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to say, historically, that's what was happening before. It was the flip. It was every female author had a male pseudonym. So I'm just saying, let's flip it back around.
Even J.K. Rowling had to publish under the initials to obscure that she was in fact a woman.
Yeah, and it's like that's incredibly recent in history. So why not?
And probably the most famous example, might I add.
The first time I came across a list of authors that had actually, that the names that I knew them by weren't their real names, it was really shocking.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, maybe this is my years of stewing on the internet with a bunch of degenerates and terrible GG people, but it's like, why not flip the script on this situation? Like, because it seems like you can still use pseudonyms pretty freely in publishing.
Mm-hmm.
So, how why, and especially I don't mean to get too like I don't know, edgy here or spicy, but in the year 2024, also, who can tell you that you can't switch around your name?
True.
Maybe I identify as this kind of an author and not that kind of an author. I'm just saying, you know, and maybe it's a little much. I don't know.
A bit of a counterpoint to that, and forgive me for not remembering names, but there was a guy in the comics industry who had published things under a female Asian pseudonym, and people thought that this writer was in fact an Asian woman, and it was actually a white guy the entire time. And when they found out, he did not have a career after the dust had settled. So
Based. I was going to be an Asian woman.
That's really fascinating about that guy. I would imagine the reason that he was so treated so harshly is because by becoming known for it, the hypocrisy of their industry was exposed. So I would say it was less about him than about him exposing the publishing industry.
It's really weird too, because if I remember correctly, he had a whole writing career on his own. Like he was still published. He was getting work under his real name. It's just this pen name and this identity that he had formed for himself under that pen name is what got him in hot water.
But yet, it's also very common and normal for authors to have multiple pen names so that different genres of writing, like I don't know how to put it, but I've heard in marketing that it's important sometimes not to confuse your reader. And so sometimes, like if you're publishing in one genre, you should use one pen name, and then if you go for a completely different genre, you're supposed to have a pen name for that other genre. So it's really that
Kind of
way.
like how Joe Rowling has done her thing to bring it back to her again
Porcelain, you're
when she was publishing, was it mystery novels?
Mhm.
Yeah, crime novels under the pen name Robert Galbraith, I think is her pen name for him was.
That sounds about right.
Ah, see, right there.
Yeah, crime is massive here into the UK. It's a real national industry. Every supermarket, I would say, pretty much every supermarket has got a bookshelf of some size, and crime novels feature fairly prominently.
You know, it's funny you say that because I don't know how big like true crime documentaries and stuff are over in the UK and I guess Europe as a whole, but in the United States it's huge. But you don't really see like that translate into popularity of crime novels. Like you would think it'd be a match made in heaven.
I don't know. I've always thought that I mean, as far as I know, romance is probably pretty much the biggest seller. They don't really need to advertise it, so it sort of bubbles away, selling huge amounts. And then I would say actually it's either crime. I think crime is number two, and then historical fiction comes in at a sort of quite close to crime, but that's number three.
and this is
That's my
from
understanding.
like charts showing sales, or is this like your personal experience with as a book club owner?
Both from my experience looking at, because I organize a couple of book clubs. So I organize the Wimbledon Book Club, as well as the Science Fiction Book Club. So I sort of keep my ear to the ground on what tends to sell and talk to booksellers. Occasionally I get, I forget the website, what it's called, but there's a website that gives information on book sales. Occasionally I'm given a login, so I have a look. That's a handful of times a year. But yeah, but I mean, the demographics of who reads what and who buys what in London might be very different from what's read and consumed outside London in more rural areas. London skews much younger than the rest of the country.
That's interesting.
Yeah, well, it's fairly normal for people who've, I mean, one of the things that people talk about in sort of cultural discourse that sort of touches on GamerGate and publishing terms is what they call the degree divide or the diploma divide. The sort of the big divide that's opened up culturally is between people who've gone to university, college, as you call it in the States, and those that haven't. Sort of more right-leaning Republican conservative perhaps don't, and those that do. Weird things happen when people go to university. They sort of end up adopting the culture or being influenced by the culture of the academics and the other students. And that usually equates to them drifting more to the left culturally. But as a result, a lot of people that come to London are graduates. I would go as far as to say that the probably close to 70-80% of the London population has a degree.
There's been a lot of talk in the States, too, about this divide between people who have higher education and people who don't, especially regarding politics.
Yes, it's very prevalent. I've actually got a really brief anecdote. There's a place that's just outside London called Kingston. It's where Henry VIII used to have one of his famous castles, Kingston. And there's about 20 years ago now, I was dating this girl briefly. She worked in a bookshop. She worked in a Starbucks inside a bookshop in this beautiful market square in this royal town just outside London, Kingston. And she was great. She eventually moved outside London. I couldn't see her anymore. But all of the people I think there were 12 people that worked in the bookshop. I think everyone who worked in the bookshop, with the exception of 2 people, and I think they were the security guard and one other person, everyone who worked in this bookshop, this Borders bookshop, had a master's.
That's interesting.
That is
and that was 20 years ago. That was 2004 or 5.
Huh.
So yeah, there's definitely elite overproduction.
How's the student debt over there?
Not as bad as you guys. I mean, it's
Okay.
fairly bad.
All right.
It's fairly bad. The universities are sort of constrained. They're reliant to a great extent on state funding, though it's between £6,000 and £9,000 per year. So a 3-year degree would be about £40,000-50,000. That would be about, I don't know, 55, 60 to $80,000.
That sounds about right.
But a lot depends on the university you go to. Obviously, the more prestigious the university, the higher the fees that they can charge.
Do you have like government subsidies for education, or like how does it all work there?
It used to be grant, but now it's student loans. So if you are lucky enough to do particularly well, to be particularly gifted, then there are grants available from a variety of institutions, because they want to make it easier for the very, very brightest to get ahead. But most people that go to university, and it's somewhere between 40 to 55% of the population, depending what part of the country you're talking about, go to university. But countries like Taiwan, the other side of the world, it's closer to 80 to 90%.
Do they have the same kind of problems of quote unquote elite overproduction?
Actually, I don't think so, because from what I understand, my fiance is from Taiwan. Their culture seems to be quite cohesive in a way that, to my mind, seems like early noughties. Like they don't seem to have suffered the sort of same social fragmentation that we have in the sort of Anglosphere.
Okay, it would be interesting to find out why that is.
I suspect that having a big brother country like China standing over your shoulder gives people a great motivation to stick together.
To congeal into a united front.
Yeah, well, I mean, the great way to bring people together is to have a common antagonist, a common foe.
Gamergate, for instance, right?
For sure.
I still think that GG had a really bizarrely diverse group of people, considering what was going on. I feel like one side was actually much more homogenous, and then the other side was very, very diverse.
Yeah, I agree.
Ironically, ironically.
Yeah,
Yeah, really.
I would hazard a guess that the people who weren't inside the media organizations attacking gamers, I think the public, for want of a better word, were much more fragmented and were at a distinct disadvantage to the people in the media institutions.
There are so many people that once everything settled down, it was interesting to discover how a lot of folks were very ideologically actually like not opposed. I'm sorry if I don't know, I sound gurgly, but not opposed, but just not as ideologically aligned as maybe you might think for a movement. And that
Oh, for
was something
sure.
yeah, and that's something I thought was really interesting. Was there was sort of over the years, there's been kind of a vague fallout where everyone's friendly to each other, but everyone also is kind of going in largely different directions. And then I feel like
Yeah.
the other side of it has been more cohesive and has just kind of been more stuck in the mud.
Yeah, that's interesting. That no, I do understand what you're talking about there. I think so. I'm trying to gather my thoughts from sort of cultural osmosis to sort of put into words what you're talking about. But yeah, the thing that I think brought a lot of people together. It's funny. I was listening to the Stephen Fry interview on trigonometry this evening, just before bed. And one of the things that he spoke about when they were asking him, you know, what is it to be British? He said a sense of fair play is quite strong, and I think even though people might not use that phrase might not come to people's mind in the Gamergate community, I think the sense of fair play, I think what people were doing, certainly a lot of journalists and a lot of media people, how they were behaving towards gamers, it offended people's sense of fair play.
I think
Yeah,
I think
there's
that's really
something
the
to
core
that.
of it.
Yeah.
You know, because even children recognize unfairness when they see even primates. You know, if one primate's treated poorly or better than the rest of the group, the other monkeys can tell, and you can see it on their faces, and even children. And when journalists and media people who have a certain amount of institutional power abuse that to abuse people who are just objecting to the content that's being put out or how somebody else is being treated, I think it's, you know, for very understandable reasons, that offends a great many people, and that is sort of superordinate to people's particular political orientations or pre-existing ideological positions. Yeah, I think some things are just more important.
I want to ask, and you can all answer this if you'd like, but how many people do you think were involved with Gamergate? And how do you define involved with Gamergate? Because that's a big question of itself. Oh, unlike the,
God.
sorry, I want to clarify. I don't mean in terms of, like people, like I don't want to, not counting like anti-Gamergate or like neutral people, but like just people who were, like quote unquote pro GG.
Well, I guess, yeah, we'd have to decide what do you mean by involved. Like, is this someone who retweeted or tweeted about Gamergate once, or people who were like actually in like dig groups, who were active on forums? Like, how are we gonna quantify this?
That's a good question.
Because the numbers could skew wildly.
Yeah, because if we're talking about like people who've retweeted it once, or people who maybe even just had like a real life conversation because they saw a video or they heard something on the news or whatever about it, right? And they had a conversation in real life, but they were sympathetic towards Gamergate. Like, is that person involved, quote unquote? Like, I don't know. But like, if you count that,
I
it's probably
wouldn't say
millions,
so.
right?
Like, if it was limited to just the people who have said the word Gamergate at one point or another, either in real life or on social media, yeah, you would have like way more people involved. It would probably be uh, at least a million, at least a million.
Yeah, I agree.
But I, as far as like actual involvement, like I would say that's people who were um, really active on forums, who were tweeting the hashtag or um, calling out other people on Twitter, or articles that were bad, or um, posting the info dumps that were out there, or like the con leaks, for example, or the infographics that were made. That I would say constitutes involvement, and
Sorry,
that.
could I just interrupt you just to ask a
Yeah, go
question
for it.
on something that you just said? You just said con leaks, as in leaks from conventions.
No, Crash Override Network, CON.
Oh, sorry. Okay, yes, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're all right. But no, I think if we're talking about how many pro Gamergate people were actively involved with that, maybe a few thousand. I don't think I don't think it got over 10,000 at any given point in time. Um,
There's a
I
guy.
don't think it got that big.
There's a guy on. There's a guy on Substack. He's a data scientist who does a lot of graphing. He's one of the people who did a lot of I can't remember his name. He did a lot of graphing on sort of rise of critical social justice terminology in newspapers, and how from sort of 2011, 2012 it wrapped up, and obviously 2013, 2014 was when it went prime time.
Mhm.
If I can remember the journalist, I suppose he's an academic who publishes on Substack. I suppose that makes him a journalist. But if I can remember the journalist's name and I got a link, I'll send it through to Tachyon Blue if I think of it.
All right, I think 10,000 is about right. That's what I usually tell people, 10,000 plus.
Mhm.
At least over, because the reason I would say that is because like on Twitter, I think it probably was about that in terms of like active people,
Mhm.
because the GamerGate auto blocker had about
Mhm.
10,000
Oh, yeah.
accounts. But I mean,
Yeah.
that's not counting Reddit or 8chan or.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's where I would get my numbers at, because KotakuInAction at its peak had like a couple of thousand people reading it like on a daily basis, and commenting. Like the traffic was huge, and the subscriber count. God, where is it now? Like 40,000 or
No,
something?
it's like 100 some
But
50,000 or something like
it's
that.
good God. See, that's how long it's been since I've looked at that damn thing. But no, like it was still like tens of thousands by the time I left as head mod over there. But it was still, God, it was still very, very active. And 8chan too. Like I didn't participate much on 8chan at its height, but from what Acid Man told me, like they needed basically full-time people um to run moderation over there. I mean, and we did too at KotakuInAction, and that was at its height. So
Could I just ask, did any of you have any interactions where Gamergate issues where you encountered it in real life, like people talking about it or
yes,
affecting
Yeah.
something in real life?
yes.
How did that?
I went to a super secret meeting.
It was actually brought up in one of my university classes at the time.
Oh, really?
Yes, I mean Gamergate was like new, and it was brought up, and like we watched some excerpts from one of Anita Sarkeesian's videos, and it was pretty one-sided about it. And I actually
Right.
wrote my final paper for that class about Gamergate,
Oh, really?
basically defending it and saying like, no, like there are legitimate complaints here. Like while there are some bad actors out there, they don't represent the movement as a whole. I got a solid grade on the paper, so
Good for you. Good for you.
yeah,
I actually had a.
Do you
Thank
still
you.
have it though?
I actually had a
Um,
great. Sorry.
That's a good question. Let me check because I've got most of the stuff that I did for college. I'll let y'all go ahead and talk while I go see if I can find this.
I've actually got a great interaction because about it because I didn't really spend much time looking at it. But one night coming back from central London in December 2014, so just after a few months after it broke out, I was sat on the sort of tube on the London Underground, and there's a particular station I have to go through, which is a junction station, and there's always a lot of people getting off and on your tube carriage at this particular station. And these three guys got on, and they were in their like late teens, early 20s, and they were laughing so hard. They were like, there was this young British Asian guy, he was Chinese guy, he was sat opposite me, and he was laughing so hard he was sliding off his seat, off his chair. And his two friends, they were crying with laughter. And after one tube stop, when we got to the next station, I said, "Sorry, you guys, I'm dying to find out what it is that you guys have done." He said, and they said, "Have you heard of GamerGate?" I said, "Well, yeah, a little bit." And he said, "We've spent the last week setting up proxies and setting up fake accounts on Reddit where we're trying to convince people in a forum that baubles on Christmas trees are patriarchal and sexist and should be removed from Christmas trees." And it went viral this afternoon. So these three guys were fucking pissing themselves with laughter that they'd managed to the thing went viral. It ended up in a newspaper here in the UK about some students somewhere over in America who'd been, I think they'd been not arrested, but they'd been detained by their university security for vandalizing a Christmas tree, taking the baubles off the Christmas tree. I couldn't believe it. It's just so crazy.
But yeah, I did talk about GamerGate in real life. If you want to answer this porcelain too, you can. I ran the St. Louis meetups. Not that big. We had like maybe like 10 people in all of St. Louis who came to these things. So I ran the St. Louis meetups and I ran 2 panels at conventions. And actually, I talked about this in the book at one point. It only came up once, I think, in all the interviews. But I actually had a coworker who was anti-GamerGate, and they ended up. We got along great at first, but not so much later on, as you'll find out in the book. So yeah, I've definitely talked about it in real life. How about you, Porcelain?
I went to a super, super secret meeting. Imagine a location I cannot disclose because it is that secret, but also completely in public. May or may not have been in the heartland of the Golden Gate place. And then, maybe, perhaps, dozens of people all were standing around awkwardly because nobody knew if they were also here for the reason, the super secret reason. And then people tried to meme subtly at each other. Very subtly. You know, imagine like a bad spy novel or a bad spy movie, and people are like, "The weather today is cloudy." You know, that kind of thing. And then slowly everyone started to realize, wait a minute, we're all here for the same reason. And then the group of people started to congeal. They started to like scoot closer to each other in this public place, and then like kind of talked, but also was nervous about talking about it in public. And then I had to go home and missed out on the whole part where they went to a bar and got really drunk. That's my super secret story.
Wow, I found it.
Also, there's at least a few people on the internet who still owe me a sandwich, and I know what they look like.
One of them is probably me, isn't it?
I mean, we can add you to the list.
I have said to a lot of people that I will buy them a sandwich if I ever see them. So
Well, we have. Hang on. We have. Do you want me to bring in Damien? Or I don't know if he wants to come in or not. He's just listening. It's up to you, Damien. Oh, you wrote an article about GamerGate. I actually haven't read it. I've read some of your other past blog posts, but not your one that's pinned on your profile. He's not going to be able to reply to me because he's not speaker.
Oh.
But if you want to
yes.
speak,
You can leave a comment on the thingy, right? Yeah, you can leave a comment, so you can say like "Let me in," and then start banging on the door. "Let me in" with that GIF.
Let me send you the link to the paper. I did find it. I had to go looking in my Google Drive for it because I remembered that I had posted it on KIA a long time ago.
Deep into the drive.
Yeah, but the date on this is May 6th, 2015. So not like the height of Gamergate, but while it was still pretty much ongoing.
Well, Damien didn't just write an article about Gamergate. He got it published on James Lindsay's new discourses. Talk about fancy.
Oh shit.
Yeah. Thanks very much for that. I appreciate that. That's cool.
That's a great article, actually. That was one of the first articles I saw that, and I have to say, it verified, because when I spoke to the guys here the other night, I was saying that I always saw Gamergate as this road accident on the other lane of the motorway, and I didn't slow down to have a look. I thought I would get sucked into it, but I could see all the dynamics, and it looked ugly.
That is the best
description. Your article was one of the first articles I think that I read about it, and that was a few years after it happened. So, and I mailed you at the time. Yeah, I did. I DM'd you to say thank you when I discovered it just over a year ago.
That's really nice of you. Yeah. Hey, I appreciate that very much. So that helped to kind of show you what it was all about then.
Yeah, really. Because I was picking it up by sort of cultural osmosis. I didn't really spend too much time looking at it, and if I saw tweets or comments or headlines, that was my level of understanding, because it just seemed so obvious what was happening, that I would read a paragraph here and a paragraph there. So your article was like a good, it was an hour's read. That's right.
Yeah. Oh, hey, that's great to hear. Actually, yes, I remember your DM. You're more familiar with the sad puppies controversy. I'm not so familiar with the details of that.
Yeah, I must admit, I tend not to call it the sad puppies controversy. But yes, you're right. I actually think about it I prefer to describe it in terms of some people decided to exclude half the population of science fiction writers. So anyone who is in any way right of center or willing to defend anyone who is right of center got tarred with the same brush, and they just tried to exclude them. But that was the sad puppies affair. It was I think it's just really ugly, really.
Indeed. Yes, but what I understand about that is it was kind of this elite circle of authors where gatekeeping in terms of politics, in terms of if you're not far left like us, you're not going to get awards, you're not going to get invites. Is that kind of the simple kind of version of what that was?
Unfortunately, yes, that's quite accurate. I've heard somebody else describe, I mean, this is more about analyzing the pathologies of the pink hair, the pink hatted. There's a very, very good social survey that was done back in 2016 or 2017 called the Hidden Tribes Survey. If you haven't come across it, it's worth Googling. I think it's Hidden Tribes Survey.
Yeah, I'm familiar with this. Yes,
that had about 8 or 9 different categories, and the sort of furthest left category was the sort of so-called progressive, the sort of remember the pink hat
Yes.
thing that happened when Trump won the election in 2017.
Yes.
So that was the first time that I'd really paid attention to that part of the political spectrum, because for a long time they had no purchase within the culture. They were sort of, I mean, back in the 1990s, the last time that particular part of the political spectrum had any cultural power, they sort of got laughed out of the room and people didn't really take them too seriously. But the internet and social media gave them, and because social media rewards virality and how inflammatory things are rather than how good the ideas are, that made their ideas seem more popular than they were, simply because more people were complaining about them. So unfortunately, we've been subject to these arseholes for the best part of the last 10 years.
That does sound unfortunate, but I do think in recent times they've suffered a lot of pushback, much more pushback, and their influence is waning. I do think so.
It certainly seems that way. Part of me is wondering, I mean, has the high tide passed, and is it now, is the tide simply going to go out, or
On
are
the woke
they?
stuff, I feel like it's going out. That's
Well, I hope so. I certainly hope so. But the thing is, there's a lot of money to be made from having cultural primacy. You can drive a lot of sales and drive a lot of advertising. And what we have now that we didn't have, say, 10 or 20 years ago is just eyeballs on something equals money. So it might be that they might try to mount some sort of rearguard action simply because there's money to be made.
Well, is there money to be made in the wokeness? I mean, I think there's some, right? I mean, there are some indie games that are quote unquote like heavily woke, and I don't know if they're successful or not. But I don't think it's like a AAA market like Concord necessarily, for like the most extreme versions of the woke stuff, at least.
True. Sorry, I was sorry. You're right, and this conversation is supposed to be about GamerGate. Sorry, I was thinking more in terms of like driving attention to various website assets, like websites, social media, or whatever, for the advertising revenue. But you're right. Gaming is dying, and gaming, it's dying fast.
We do have a question here from Ultimate Sexiest PhD, or at least a request to speak. What's up? What's on your mind?
Oh, oh well. Good day to all of you. I've been banned so many times before, so you people won't recognize me. Well, as you know, as the early years of GamerGate, I've have been talk about like the political and ideological connections within the video game industry, the think tanks that we know today as, of course, what's that? The DIESG. So have these revelations prove the connections that were revealed before? Because before we were, of course, the ESA labs have been um, pigeonholing GamerGate as ethics in journalism, which became, of course, dragged the movement to the mud, poisoned the well, and now these things have been revealed for the for the public to see. So, are you? Is it only justified to say that people Anons were right on V and Vol all along, or are we still going to deny that?
I'm sorry. What's the question exactly, my friend?
Okay, after all the revelations that we had, that was revealed, the DEI ESG connections, because we know we have those things are connected with Marxist ideology. Are you going to say? Is it safe to say that it's the revelations that V and Paul said all along have been right. As in, they're right all along.
Well, Paul
This
is
is
always
not.
right, but
And
Mhm,
Paul was right again, y'all.
mhm.
but what were they? What was the case that they were making?
The fact that there are Marxist connections within the video game industry and the video game media, and of course,
I don't know.
with
That's not really an area I've like spent my time focusing on in terms of
mm,
research.
I could probably
I
answer
mean, I'm
this.
sure there are Marxist developers, and actually, Alex, this is probably a better question for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I did a little bit of research into the origins of Gamergate, like how the industry and journalists sort of came to the stances that they held during Gamergate, because it felt like they all kind of turned at once, but it was really more of a slow burn. Um, there were a series of activists who were actively trying to change the industry between roughly 2007 and 2012, when a lot of them really succeeded in their goal. And by 2013, it seemed like the whole social justice movement was widespread across not only the industry but gaming journalism as well. Um, some of these people were in fact Marxists, or they had more anti-capitalist leanings. I don't know if I could say that there was like a big conspiracy as far as like the people who were pushing for oh hell, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, I can't figure out the word I'm looking for. Anyway, there wasn't like a wider conspiracy to try and push the industry one way or another. It was literally just activists doing activism work. It was them trying to push for greater representation, as they said, which in turn was more uh, DEI initiatives as we know them today, for more critical theory in reviewing video games and treating video games as artwork through academia. So you had more of a critical theory line there. But it was basically just activism work. Like it wasn't a broader conspiracy. It was just people who pushed in certain directions. They got the ears of the people that they were trying to get, and they changed their minds, basically. I don't know if they all changed their minds at once because it seemed like a popular thing to do, or if they were all changed because they all read the same stuff and the same arguments and were like, yeah, that makes sense. I don't know. But I know where the push came from, at least.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I've got to go to bed soon. Do you mind if I have a go at reformulating that to see if I've got the gist of what you're saying? One of the things that I found really fascinating over the last 10 years, I've never really considered myself to be part of a social movement or a philosophical movement that's happened within the culture when I've been alive. I mean, it was happening in the 90s when I was in my teens and 20s, but I wasn't really involved in it. And one of the great things that I've discovered is I've read more philosophy and political theory in the last 10 years to try and get a handle on what's been going on in the culture. That the puppies and the publishing and the Gamergate they were all caught up in this. And I think, just going back to what you were saying there, that I think there only has to be a small percentage of people who are really committed and knowledgeable about the Marxist origins of the talking points, and they can make their ideas seem very palatable. And there are usually a much larger number of what they call useful idiots who will adopt the talking points that the politically informed Marxist educated strategists will put out there, and the useful idiots will go, yeah, equities, that sounds good. Let's put equity into games. And you might get 30, 40, 50% of the population just happily repeating the talking points with actually no idea that it has a communist, Marxist, Maoist, Marcusian background to it.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically hitting the nail on the head there. I mean, like I said, some of them were out and out Marxist oriented. You know, some of them were anti-capitalist. Some of them were more like anarcho-socialists. But they all got those talking points in. They got their hooks in, and they made them palatable to. Did I call games journalists impressionable?
You may have done.
What? No. Yeah. What? Oh.
Listen,
But,
I've got to go to bed in a minute. Do you mind if I just ask you guys one last question? I realize I've been
sure.
talking a lot this evening because it's a really fascinating conversation. So even though it's 2 a.m. in the morning, I'm loath to go. But one final question: I've been wondering, because I'm sure you guys have either heard of or remember the Occupy movement. Obviously, in the wake of the 2008 financial crash, that the whole world. I mean, we were literally hours or a day away from there being a run on almost all the banks, which would have been 1929 times, well, at least 1929 levels of fallout. And then there was the Occupy movement in 2010, 2011. And then what the fuck happened to the left that they suddenly went? Because from my point of view, the way I read it, that like Occupy was a solid working. I mean, Occupy was a solid working class movement. I mean, it pulled people in from academia, and it certainly had a lot of well-educated people. But at its root, it was about economic fairness, and it was about people getting a raw deal economically and wanting that to be addressed. Like, what the fuck happened in the 2 years or 3 years between 2010, 2011, say Occupy, and then the Gamergate social justice? Like, those 3 years, I feel like they're not really as well examined for what actually caused the change. We know there was a change, and what it was in 2010, 2011, and what it turned in, what the culture turned into in 2013, 2014 onwards. But who was behind? Like, what caused that shift? Do any of you have theories on that?
Have you heard the conspiracy theory about how it was all engineered to shut down a potential class war?
Yeah, I've heard that, but I suppose I keep thinking, like, is there a curtain somewhere that we can look behind? And are there any receipts that anyone has shown to say, look, this group, like these sorts of things have been pulled off by, and like I'm definitely pulling on my tin hat right now, but like these are the sort of things that the CIA has a long history of doing to other countries.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you go ahead.
Okay. So we know that Occupy failed in part because of the infighting.
Yeah.
And we know that the infighting started with the idea of the progressive stack, which is basically social justice in action.
Yeah.
And we can go back and look at when these certain social justice-y type terms started popping up more and more in the press in headlines. And it's roughly around the time where Occupy started imploding. So the conspiracy theory is that someone got into Occupy, or some group infiltrated Occupy to get them to start infighting over, race, sex, ethnicity, etc. And that ended up being picked up by the media, which ran with it and turned it into a sort of mini culture war on its own, which then grew into what we have today in the social justice movement that exploded roughly late 2012, early 2013. That's the theory. I don't know how much of it I believe, but that's the theory.
There might be something
Have
to
you
that.
got a date in your mind? If you could put a pin in a particular month or particular time that Occupy started imploding, do you have like a particular period that you would put your finger on?
I don't know the exact date, but I would say when the girl named Ketchup was on the Colbert Report and did the interview with Stephen Colbert, that was when everything started to implode because she made Occupy look like a gang of lunatics.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, dear.
Now, I don't know, again, what date that was. I don't know when. I'm sure you can find that interview on the internet somewhere. I'm absolutely certain it has been archived.
I'm
Just
Googling
because of
it right
how
now.
crazy it was.
So there's a video from Occupy Richmond in 2011, 10/6/11, where basically there's the huge crowd. There's a huge crowd, and one of the activists kind of tries to organize things, speaker roles into a progressive stack, and you can hear one of the people objecting to it.
Oh, I've heard that one. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the people is like, I thought this was an egalitarian movement, you know. But that, yeah, you can, so you can see. I mean, I don't know if that would be the earliest example, but yeah, you can see the fracturing starting to happen. You know, around that time, they had such massive support, and then self-sabotaged themselves. I think I think there may be something to what Alex is suggesting in terms of the convenience of the timing. There is a graph floating around out there that shows the data of the various big newspapers and media organizations. Their usage of the social justice terminology just skyrockets.
Yeah, exactly.
At a certain point. Although, you know, if you listen to Christina Hoff Summers and Helen Pluckrose, they'll talk about how the social justice movement has its roots in postmodernist thought and how that's weaved its way through various universities over decades. If anyone wants to learn more about the ins and outs of that, there's a video from Helen Pluckrose called "The Evolution of Postmodern Thought." That's on YouTube, and she goes into detail there. She's a pretty smart person. She's from the UK. She's tried to help people in the UK deal with unfair DEI initiatives in the workplace and so on.
Yep.
So she seems to know. Like, she will be able to cite the exact books and the exact thinkers who were pushing this stuff going back decades in the various academic institutions.
Do you know if she goes into like in America, Students for a Democratic Society in the 1960s?
Offhand, I don't recall that.
Okay, because I know that is like not really like the main origin point, but like an origin point of where academia ended up as far as like DEI and pushing for certain political views.
I think you know to sum it up, what the damage that postmodern thought did to philosophy was that they really tried to tarnish the term truth and try to kind of muddy the waters about whether or not objectivity exists. And you can actually see a lot of that language in the Gamers Are Dead articles. Yeah, I think I even mentioned it in that New Discourses article. It's offhand. I'm trying to remember what was the name of that guy that won the. He was really good at Jeopardy. but he's also
Arthur
an
Chu?
insane. Yeah, Arthur Chu. Yeah. Like, what did he say? Just a second. He said, yeah. So, quoting Arthur Chu, the subset of entitled, belligerent gamers convinced that being objectively right entitles them to defend their rightness by any means necessary or overwhelmingly male. So you see there, he's attacking uh, he's attacking the concept of that a person could be objectively correct, and as well he's using social justice identity language to muddy the waters with that.
I tend to find these people are much, 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 much less successful in real life if you're having a conversation with them. I very, 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 very rarely see them succeed on an interpersonal level. They like flinging shit around and then running away. They like group dynamics where they can bully, but on a personal level, I would maybe go as far as to say that I've never seen them succeeding on an interpersonal level.
Well, you know, in terms of success, you could measure success in any number of ways. But like in terms of my own personal success, I feel as though I've been cheated. I've been cheated out of the career and life that I should have had, because I've had the unfortunate, um, the misfortune of running into social justice ideologues over and over again.
Oh, really?
Because because I went to university fairly kind of late into my life. I went to university around 27, 28. I wanted to pursue media. I wanted to make movies. I wanted to write scripts and be creative and that. And yeah, I ran into someone with a 40 overlayer. And, you know, that was even maybe, yeah, that was just a couple of years before Gamergate, and like this person is just pushing, like, we're accepting, basically trying to give people a hand up into the media industry, but doing it all with identity politics, favoring identity groups, and you could see it even all the way back then. I think that was around 2012, and yeah, just favoring different identity groups. And I remember there was a Facebook post from this person where she was like, "Hey, good news! We've decided to accept non-binary people into our women's only industry group." It's like, oh, go fuck yourselves, you fuckers. And it affected me on a very deep personal level. I got into arguments with these people, and these were people who I knew, like especially like this person who had a 40 over me in the university, and I'm arguing with her, and I'm getting from her and from these different people, "You don't understand because you have male privilege and you have white privilege," and they're saying that shit to me. And it's like, fuck you guys. You know, I grew up in Belfast in the fucking 80s and 90s. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You know, I could tackle it intellectually, but it also affected me on a personal level. Um, and then as well, you know, I was trying to get into the industry here in Belfast, and the Northern Ireland screen, unfortunately, is very, very thick with the social justice ideology, and I voiced my disagreement very, very much with them. And like the opportunities, most of the opportunities are laden with this language. So I sent kind of like an argument to like one of the heads. I'm not going to give away the name for privacy's sake, but I'll just quote a little bit of what she said to me in an email. I should explain why our work in Sin, that's CINE, that's one of their initiatives, is important and particularly focused around diversity and inclusivity. the Northern Ireland Screen is like the rest of the industry bodies in the UK, has a responsibility to address the lack of diversity currently in the creative industries. And she goes on and on, etc., etc. So it's a nightmare for me personally. It's been a nightmare. I should be 10 years in at least into a career, and it's been robbed from me, and I'm kind of bitter about it, and I've decided to put my focus on. I'm just going to try to become rich in cryptocurrency.
Honestly,
And then you can wear your meme sunglasses.
Yeah, I worked so fucking hard. You know, I got a first class honors from university, and then I got a master's degree. And what the fuck was it all for? And I'm bitter as fuck about it. And so if you know, it's like I've given and given and given, and I've gotten nothing back. And you know, so yeah, that's I'm just going to focus on myself. You know, I'm on benefits, so I'm personally I'm not successful. I'm on benefits, and I'm just going to focus on my own creative writing and try to contribute to the culture for my own creativity.
Well,
That's kind of my focus at the moment.
I'm extremely sorry to hear that. I really am sorry to hear that. But listen, I've got to go. I've got to go to sleep. I would love to talk to you guys longer. Do you know if there are any GamerGate style Telegram groups that are out there?
I
I wouldn't
don't
be
know about
surprised. If
Telegram. I wouldn't be surprised if there were, but well, actually, there might. I might be surprised if there were actually, because GamerGate was so long ago. I'm not sure when Telegram really blew up, but I know there's like Discord groups. Like there's GamerGate Historia, which is on Discord, and my Discord server, the Flight Deck. On there's a link on my Twitter profile. And there's also KotakuInAction on Reddit. There's 8chan V. They have a GamerGate thread there. There's a bunch of communities that still quote unquote talk about it. If you want, I can send you some of them.
Yeah. Please do. I tend to limit the number of instant messages that I have, because my tablet's nice, but if I install too many things that live in the background, it tends to drag to a crawl. So I've just got Telegram on there, really. But yeah, listen, it's been lovely talking to you, Damien. I'm really sorry to hear about your experience, but I'm glad you got a plan on moving forward. I'm going to hit you up because we're in the same time zone. We should keep in touch. Thank you so much for doing these. I'm sorry if I tend to monologue, get on my soapbox, because this stuff just makes me so crazy. It's good for the soul to get this stuff out there, I think.
It's really good to hear from you. Yeah, it's really good to hear from you and hear your perspective on the aspects of the whole culture war that I'm not so familiar with. So I appreciate that, and appreciate all your kind comments. Thank you, and I hope you have a good night.
Very, very good night to you all. Yeah.
Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Damien. Thanks to all of you. Damien, I'm going to hit you up with the DM. Okay, I am actually going to go. Night.
All right, thanks for coming on, and I am also sorry to hear what you hear about the situation, Damien. That's terrible. I'm sorry, but we do have a couple questions. I did bring in Thomas Sheedy. You're live. What's up?
Hey, how's it going? Yeah, thanks for having me. I saw this. I saw Damien. Anybody who I follow, when I see them speaking in spaces, I usually try to see what's going on, and this is definitely semi relates to me. So very glad to be here.
All right. Well, how does GamerGate relate to you, Thomas?
So for my career and what I do now, I run an called Atheists for Liberty, and Atheists for Liberty is a U.S. nationwide organization of famous atheists, plenty of whom, especially those on like our advisory board, that got canceled by a lot of other formerly leading think tanks and groups in U.S. as atheism. And
you're roboting, Thomas. Just a heads up. Thomas, you're roboting.
Initiatives.
Can other people hear me?
And a lot of this started... Oh, sorry.
You've been roboting. It's cutting in and out really bad. Can other people hear that too, or is it just me?
I can hear it too, yeah.
Oh, you can hear it too. Okay, let me see if I can change that here. Oh, I know. One second.
That's my favorite
Okay,
phrase.
that should be way better now. It's flipped to a much better Wi-Fi. Um, so that's why I was on a very crappy Wi-Fi signal that was just linked to my office. So there we go. I'm on the better fiber optic. So yeah, sorry about that. I'm good now.
Awesome. Sorry, can you go ahead and start over then? We couldn't hear very
Yeah,
much of what
yeah.
you had to say. Sorry.
So, yeah, I run a national organization in the U.S. called Atheists for Liberty. And a lot of the people that are attributed to that organization, including myself, came from the former New Atheist movement. And a good chunk of the people that are now in this kind of new movement that we're starting, they were canceled from the old movement, I guess you could say, because they were not they didn't agree with the kind of DEI social justice kind of complaints and initiatives that were happening in the atheist community at the time. There was an infamous event that happened in 2011 called Elevator Gate in Ireland, and it was based on this one event of a crazy radical um, fourth wave feminist named Rebecca Watson claiming that she got approached in an elevator for coffee, and she was approached just kind of in a weird-ish way. And this is an example of systemic sexism and racism and all these other issues plaguing the atheist world. Atheism, kind of with video games, kind of with science, is kind of in that kind of nerdy counterculture space, or at least it definitely was in the late 2000s and early 2010s. And so whenever the kind of social justice agenda was advancing within the Gamergate kind of world, the same was happening in parallel in atheism. So a lot of Gamergate's opponents were Elevator Gate's opponents too. And so many of our careers and the careers of the people I associate with are actually have been developed due to this kind of resistance to the social justice activists. There's some of the same ones that have operated kind of in both spheres of influence.
It was Atheism Plus, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah, atheism plus being a product of this, claiming that you need atheism plus social justice. Otherwise, you weren't a good atheist, you weren't a good humanist. Richard Carrier, who I will admit has gotten much better over the years, he's kind of regretted what he did back then, kind of bringing that on at the American Atheist Convention over a decade ago. It just led to the downfall of the new atheist counterculture in America. And so when I was young, I actually took a lot of these canceled big atheists and skeptics and had to form a whole new national group. And that started, unfortunately, due to the success of the Elevator Gate / Gamergate radical feminists who came in and scorched earth everything that we were doing successfully in the world of atheism at the time.
Yeah, this has been brought up in the books a few times, at least once in somewhat detail with Kraut. You know Kraut, the YouTuber?
The name's familiar.
He went by Kraut and T back in the GG days. But I interviewed him. He came from the atheism community. He told me about that, though the atheism community split's not covered too in depth in the book because it's not necessarily like quote unquote Gamergate related,
Yeah.
like in the sense that it's not about the gaming industry. But it does come up somewhat.
It's some of the spheres and criticisms were kind of adjacent, right? So the Anita Sarkeesian types, they were definitely in contact with the kind of Rebecca Watson types from the atheist world. So there was a lot of parallel movements and kind of DEI initiatives They operated and went to a lot of the same conferences and knew of each other. So unfortunately, rational people that were kind of on our quote side in the Gamergate world, they were kind of at the same time, you could say, defeated for many years, similarly to us in the majority on the atheism side of things. I would say there's a bit of a change now. I think people are now waking up and realizing, Gamergate was over 10 years ago, Elevator Gate was over 10 years ago, that a lot of this DEI stuff that's been plaguing and destroying Western civilization, and actually the positive things that you could say that enabled, you could say, equality, liberty, positive things that used to kind of be in a bipartisan way cherished in the world and in the West, that this kind of social justice stuff did go too far. And I think people are now getting sick of it. AOC has removed her pronouns from her bio. Walmart is, I think, either critiquing or dismantling its own DEI program. Disney, whether you agree or not with this decision, I think they just came out with news that there's a trans character that they're now pulling from a series or a show that they're up to. So this is great stuff to see, and I'm hoping that the same happens. Just responding to a text. I hope the same happens in things like video games, things like gaming, because for a long time we've seen the symptom of their success and the failure of normal people to cap against this stuff. I was into Star Wars Battlefront 2 back in the day, the first the 2005, but then the 2017 version, and people that were complaining about the kind of Mary Sue type issue in that game. Well, who was one of the people that helped make that game more social justice friendly? I found out that it was like an Anita Sarkeesian acolyte type person. But I think there might be a shift now. People are now starting to see the consequences of Gamergate, the consequences of things like Elevator Gate, and these kind of things that we thought were once kind of nerdy and kind of just on the internet, and no, they don't represent anyone big. Well, now there's DEI everywhere. This social justice, pink-haired extremism is now everywhere, but now normal people are kind of standing up and trying to toss it in the trash.
Yeah, we did talk about this earlier too. I'm not sure if you caught that part of the conversation, but I think the woke stuff is very much on its way out in general. I think there's going to be places where it remains, like certain institutions, like academia, but perhaps the media, unfortunately, where it's going to have a longer life. But I think that in mainstream culture, it's basically, I think people are done with it.
Yeah,
and it's losing its power. But I don't know what's another thing.
Yeah,
No,
I think it is. So
yeah, I think it's on its way out too. I mean, it's become a net negative financially for a lot of these people. I mean, look at what the Bud Light boycott did, for example. Like it single-handedly took Bud Light, the king of beers in the United States, off of its throne because of some DEI bullshit. So it's if it's going to hurt the pocketbooks of these companies, then naturally they're going to be inclined to move away from it. And I think the last couple of years of resistance has shown that it is a net negative for them financially. So naturally they are going to move away from it and try to find other avenues to um, better relate to consumers and customers.
Oh, Thomas isn't a speaker anymore. I don't know if that was deliberate or not, but if you we're still trying to speak, you can select it again, and I'll bring you back in. Otherwise, we'll probably wrap it up in about 8 minutes if that works for everybody.
Yeah, works for me.
Sure.
Cool. Well, let's go ahead and probably move it to light items. And for anyone who's listening, either to the recording or the two of you are watching live, who aren't speakers, this space is to promote the Kickstarter campaign I'm running for the People of GamerGate, GamerGateBook.com. I've interviewed over 70 people involved on both sides, mostly pro GamerGate, but some antis as well, and a lot of neutral observers who are sort of like Michael Koretsky, Chris Ferguson, who's a researcher who studied GamerGate, journalists who covered it. I've interviewed a ton of people involved. And you can see the full list of people on the Kickstarter page, GamerGateBook.com. If you want to back it, we're almost 70% of the way there. So Let's go ahead and get us to 70% and then to 100%. We've got 20 days left on the campaign. We're over halfway to our goal. I feel pretty confident. But yeah, we need your support. So thank you, and please be sure to back. And any closing thoughts from anyone before we move on to Christmas talk real quick, I guess, or whatever else you guys want.
I think, did Thomas Sheedy disappear there? I wanted to just say, he does good work. I've actually donated before to Atheist Liberty. You know, him and his organization, they've been a good counter to that kind of atheism plus kind of identity ideologue contingent of the secular atheist sort of community. So I wanted to tell him personally I appreciate his work, but I think he vanished.
He did indeed. Maybe he'll listen to the recording later. I don't know. All right. Well, anyone else have any topics they want to bring up real quick?
I just want to say thank you for tolerating my extreme derailment campaign. Oh no, and now I've understood that I've been speaking into the wrong microphone the whole time. Oh no. Okay, that was my bit.
Well, anyone have any Christmas plans they want to bring up or any other topics?
Well, you know what? One thing that you brought up earlier was GamerGate community meetups, and unfortunately, I missed out on that. I think the nearest one to me was somewhere in England. I think I was within the first year or two of that GamerGate kicked off. But what I would be interested to hear more about, like, was that positive for you guys to meet up with other GamerGate supporters? Did you keep in touch with people over the years?
So
I went to only one meetup. I helped organize it actually for North Carolina. Not that many people showed up actually. I think it was like either 3 or 4 of us. And one of those people was a fellow KotakuInAction moderator who I still talk to pretty regularly. Although he's no longer a moderator anymore. The other guy, we still follow each other on Twitter and we'll banter there on occasion. I don't remember. Again, I don't remember if there was another person. I think it was just 3 of us. Maybe it could have been 4. But we had a good time. I mean, we went to a bar and arcade, and we had a good time. It was some good shit. I regret that I didn't get to go to any of the bigger meetups, like in Richmond or DC.
Yeah,
That sounds good. Good shit. I like that.
I regret not going to some of the bigger ones. I went to, the little, I guess I would call it the spy meeting, in the heart of the enemy territory. But I wish I would have made a point more to meet up more often when those were a thing.
yeah, St. Louis doesn't have a lot of GamerGate people. At least not a lot of GamerGate people who go to meetups. I think the biggest one we had was like 8 people. I've only kept in touch with really one of them, aside from a couple people who I already knew beforehand. I've only kept in touch with one of them, but he's a good guy. So good friendship there, and it was a lot of fun. I think the meetups were definitely worth doing, both from like a hosting perspective. I didn't attend ones that other people hosted because, well, I live in St. Louis, but yeah, I think it was a good experience for me personally, and I think a lot of people had a lot of positive memories and experiences with it. Though I can't speak for everybody. Actually, one person did have a negative experience for sure, at least a little bit. One of the people I've interviewed, do you know Colta Vivian?
Yes, yes, I remember her.
Yes.
So she actually brought up she organized the San Francisco and Bay Area meetups for a little bit. Her and some other people did too. And when she passed it on to other people, she says that she had an incident where one of the GG Revolt people, according to her, was supposedly stalking her, which I wouldn't really be super shocked by. Or at least not stalking her in real life necessarily, but like threatening her and bothering her online, I guess you can say, or harassing her online. And She was worried that this guy was going to show up to the meetup, and she told some of the other organizers about it. This was after she wasn't the organizer anymore, and she says that according to her, that they didn't seem to care. She said that what they told her was, "Oh, we'll have a beer with him and we'll tell him, that's not okay. You got to stop this." And she said that she felt like that wasn't enough. That they probably should have taken additional action.
Yeah,
But he never even showed up, I don't think.
that
So
sounds
like
about
it
right.
wasn't like a. But from her perspective, they didn't take her safety seriously.
Yeah, that sounds pretty bad. I remember the GG Revolt people. I'm pretty sure even Rolf was involved with them and
Yep,
talked
he
at
was.
length with them. And I remember, because I'm pretty keen on hearing out a lot of people, a lot of different perspectives, and trying not to prejudge. And so I sat and listened to one of the GG Revolt discussion live streams, and even Rolf was involved in that, and they talked for hours, and they were talking about Cult of Vivian quite a lot. And even though I was listening for hours, I found it really hard to make heads or tails of what exactly their issue with her was. A lot of it is really drama farming. It's internet blood sports, and they'll pick on any kind of perception of, I don't know, weakness or whatever, to milk the hell out of any drama that they can.
Yeah, their whole modus operandi, if you will, was there should be no e-celebs in Gamergate. Like Gamergate should have been an anonymous movement from the start with no leaders, no public faces, and everyone who had made a name for themselves was just grifting, basically. And their idea was to just take all of them down.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's not too far off.
I think people see Ethan Rolf for what he is these days. I think he was successful somewhat years ago in regards to driving a wedge between people and taking a huge part in creating drama and creating a lot of unnecessary and silly infighting.
All right. Well, thank you for showing up, everyone. Thanks for watching. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate you, Damien, Porcelain, Alex. Thank you so much. It's important to me that this is successful, and I appreciate you took the time out of the day on a weeknight to help me, hopefully, try and make this a success.
It was my pleasure, man.
Thank you very much.
I enjoyed
you.
listening to all of you. Thank you.
Do you want to shout yourselves out real quick? Any work you're doing or where people can find you?
I am the Hat 2 everywhere on the internet. I have a WordPress blog, which I have used to delve into the prehistory of Gamergate, which is events that led up to Gamergate itself. So far, I've got 3 pieces on there. If you want to take a look, the link is on my Twitter or X page. And yeah, if you like it, let me know.
Awesome. Porcelain, do you have anything you want to shout yourself out or?
I am an enigma wrapped in a mystery, wrapped in a. I have nothing to promote. I am just here. That's all.
Okay, Damien.
I'm Damien Cardile, and also previously known as Kian Demo, and I still upload YouTubes and gaming streams sometimes to my Kian Demo YouTube channel. And I don't have anything right now in particular to promote. So I'm just existing and playing games and whatnot.
Playing games is fun. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on, everyone, and thanks for watching. If you haven't already, please back the Kickstarter at GamerGateBook.com or the People of GamerGate on Kickstarter. We are almost 70% there. We're 66%. Thank you, and have a great night, everyone.
Godspeed, Tachyon, fighting the good fight.
Thank you.